You did everything right. And it still doesn't feel like enough. Not because you failed, not because you didn't try, but because somewhere inside you, there is a standard that keeps moving every time you get close to it. You finish the task. You question whether you did it right. You receive a compliment. You quietly dismiss it. You achieve something you worked toward for months, and instead of feeling proud, you feel one of two things: nothing at all, or a quiet suspicion that you got lucky. And the strangest part? You cannot point to a reason, because from the outside, your life looks like progress. But on the inside, the verdict is always the same. Not quite enough. Not yet. Maybe never. Today, psychology has something important to say about this, and it is not what most people expect. What you are experiencing has a name in psychology. Researchers call it chronic self-discrepancy, the persistent gap between who you are and the standard you believe you should already be. Psychologist Tori Higgins at Columbia University identified this pattern decades ago, finding that people who experience this gap most intensely also tend to experience the highest levels of self-critical thought, emotional dissatisfaction, and what he called a chronic sense of failure, not because they are failing, but because their internal measuring system was calibrated wrong from the beginning. The measuring system is the problem, not you. Neurologically, this connects to a structure called the default mode network, the part of the brain active during self-evaluation. In people with chronic self-discrepancy, this network activates more frequently, more intensely, and more critically than average. Always comparing, always measuring, always finding the gap. The result is a mind that cannot simply rest in achievement, because achieving something only moves the standard higher, not closer. But here is what psychology keeps finding about people who carry this feeling. It almost never starts in adulthood. For most people who never feel good enough, the pattern begins in childhood. In homes where love, approval, or safety felt conditional, where praise was rare and criticism was precise, where being good was never quite as visible as falling short. You learned early. Achievement earns love. Maybe no one said it directly, but the message was clear. Good grades brought warmth. Mistakes brought distance. Success was noticed briefly, and then the bar moved. Developmental psychologists call this conditional positive regard. When a child receives approval based on performance rather than simply for existing, the child does not think, "My parent has unrealistic standards." The child thinks, "I am not enough yet." And that thought, "I am not enough yet," becomes so deeply wired into the nervous system that it follows the person into adulthood, into careers, into relationships, into every room they enter, evaluating and measuring and quietly concluding the same thing it always has. It was not a truth. It was a lesson. And lessons learned young run very, very deep. But here is what the research actually reveals about people who feel this way. And this part changes everything. In 2021, researchers studying self-critical thinking found something that completely reframes this experience. The people who reported the highest levels of chronic self-doubt, the ones who never felt their work was good enough, who dismissed compliments, who felt like frauds despite evidence of competence, also scored significantly higher on measures of conscientiousness, empathic accuracy, and what researchers called moral sensitivity. The self-doubt and the quality were the same system. The same internal drive that makes you question your work is the same drive that makes your work genuinely careful, genuinely thoughtful, genuinely better than average. The attention to detail, the self-awareness, the refusal to settle, these are not flaws wearing the costume of virtue. They are the signature of a mind that genuinely cares about the quality of what it does and who it is. Most people do not carry that weight. You do. The problem is not that you care too much. The problem is that the measuring system was calibrated in childhood when you were too young to question it and too small to know it wasn't yours. And here is the painful irony. The harder you work to finally feel good enough, the further away it gets, because the standard rises with every achievement and the measuring system was never designed to say done. You reach the goal, feel nothing. You exceed expectations, find the flaw. You are told you did well, wait for the part where they say but. Psychologists call this the arrival fallacy, the belief that a future achievement will finally deliver the feeling of enoughness that the present never provides. It doesn't arrive. It was never going to. Because the feeling of never being good enough was not born from your achievements. It was born from a measuring system installed before you were old enough to evaluate it, and achievement was never its intended solution. So what do you actually do with this? Therapists who work with this pattern make a counterintuitive observation. The first thing that helps is not working harder, or achieving more, or raising the bar further. The first thing that helps is tracing the standard back to its origin. Schema therapy, one of the most well-researched approaches for this specific pattern, teaches that the standard you are measuring yourself against is not an objective truth about your worth. It is a schema, an early belief formed in childhood, adopted without consent, and maintained by a nervous system that learned to equate approval with safety. The meta moment here is important. Reading this right now, some part of you is probably already asking, but what if my standards are just high? What if I really am not good enough yet? That question is the schema talking. A person whose standards are genuinely calibrated does not feel chronic emptiness at the finish line. They feel satisfaction, even temporarily. If you have never felt that, the issue is not the work. It is the measuring system. You are allowed to be good enough today. Not when you finish the next thing, today. Not because the work is perfect, but because the standard that says otherwise was never yours to carry in the first place. The standard was installed in you by people who were carrying their own. People who measured love in achievements because that is how love was measured for them, in homes you never chose, in years you cannot change. You can put it down. Not all at once, not easily, but the moment you understand where it came from, it begins, very slowly, to lose its power over you. If this felt like you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Sometimes the most powerful thing is simply knowing that the voice telling you that you are not enough is not the truth. It is history. Subscribe to Psychology Enigma. Every week, we go deeper into the patterns that quietly shape who we are. Because understanding yourself is where everything begins.